Hello, Life Outside podcast listeners. It's Dani, and I have another story for you. This one is called Dirtbag Siren. I come from a world of moss and ferns. It is also a world of mountaintops and ridgelines, but they don't achieve the arid dryness of the ones I'd been habituating during my time in the East Sierra. In the Sierra, the rocks don't see as much moisture and are largely covered in rainbow arrays of lichen and dust. The warm weather had meant that I had been wearing my chacos, more than my hiking shoes and socks, and as I descended the avalanche chute to my camp for water and something to bring back to cook for dinner, I mused that my former partner would likely not be impressed by my dirty and calloused feet. He had never said anything to hint at his dismay for my hiker and dirtbag ways in the past, and I did try to keep my feet as clean as possible, but I knew that he was in the crowd that did not appreciate a female foot that was not polished like immaculate stone. I thought of his good friend, also a video maker of sorts, one who was even more well-known, who had focused many of his latest videos on a woman who traveled much of the world in a van with her then-boyfriend. They had been roast videos, and one of the tamer ones had pinpointed her dirty feet. How else would the feet of a dirtbagger look, I had wondered, but kept stuffed inside, vowing to improve the condition of my feet ragged from years of hiking and going sandaled or barefoot. His roasts had at one time been funny, but had recently become more focused on this woman and her life and had devolved into something mean and pointless, rather than smart and witty. His troll army had, as she and her friends and family attested, taken up the task of harassing her. Just after the last video he had put out, one that had further mocked her in a lazy but vicious way, she ended her life. My dirty feet felt good. I was happy to have them back, in honor of her and those of us who chose to embrace life over locking ourselves up in vans or basements, hunched over screens and devoting much of our time to tearing others down or hiding from self-reflection and growth. I allowed the dust and dirt to settle in even more. The following day, I moved on, but not very far. I traded the mountains of Mammoth Lake for a lake tucked under snowy alpine-looking peaks. The snow would likely be gone soon, but for the time that I was there, I was rewarded with what looked like a true Sound of Music setting. I passed by June and Silver Lakes, having stayed at one years ago, and now being turned off by the tourist feel, especially after a few months that I'd been passing in relative tranquility, away from the reminders of the brashness of the real world and those that inhabited it with me. I stopped at Grant Lake, the last lake on the June Lake Loop Road, and found a spot to make a late breakfast, or perhaps an early lunch. I could spend the entire day and night here, I realized, but as it was adjacent the road, I would have constant company, making things that were best done in private much more difficult, if not downright awkward. As I perched on a rock in the sun and surveyed the other side of the lake, I saw several roads that shot off into places along the lakeside. Camping spots, I mused. That is where I would go, if I could figure out how to get there. While I determined how to get to the other side, a family of 4 pulled in and passed my spot, parking at the end of the rocky outcropping. Fishing gear and jackets emerged, and they disappeared down into the rocky beach below. I didn't make it to the spots that I'd first spied, the road being too rocky and divoted for my tastes, but I found a lovely spot just before the area, a beach with several areas for camping. I might not be alone, I warned myself, but it wasn't just off the main road. It would be relatively peaceful unless a group of party campers showed up. The view of the lake and the Disney Dream Mountains behind it were enough to convince me that it was worth the chance. A few cars entered the area, but all continued on the road that I hadn't wanted to take. It wasn't really about going down, it was the prospect of getting up and out once it was time to leave. The road being constantly changed and made worse with each vehicle that passed over it. I was sure that they all knew what they were doing, and as I walked to the area during sunset, noticed that there was even a small RV tucked between a small grove of trees. I didn't feel envy and returned to my spot on the more accessible, if not rocky, beach, which remained just for me. The following day, I took the road further in, hoping that the beach or the road would connect with the other side of the lake. I wanted to hike up to the hills to do a Sound of Music in front of the alpine scene. The road did not continue, and the beach didn't reach the paid campground on the other side. Oh well, I thought. I'd do it tomorrow on the way out. Perhaps the campground, which advertised a general store and showers as well, would allow me to park in the lot for an hour or so. As I was returning to my spot, I saw a minivan perched on the hill just above the beach. It turned, as if about to leave, and then corrected, turning instead towards the beach and my sight. It was early in the day, just about noon, and I hoped that they were day visitors, but also knew that I might have company for the day and possibly for the night. I silently and guiltily hoped that it would just be for a time. I entered my car, pulled out my laptop, and began writing. After I was satisfied with what I had written for the day, I noticed that the minivan was almost directly behind me, in the same spot that it had been when I had last looked at it. It wasn't in a spot, just in the middle of what served as the sand portion of the beach. There was a walker in front of the passenger side front tire, and I saw that the entire front end was entrenched in sand. It was stuck, and obviously by someone who was compromised in terms of mobility. I approached the car, blue handicap placard in place, and saw that the occupants were two older people, a man and a woman. "Are you okay?" I asked. "Do you have cell service?" I did not, but was ready to walk toward the main road where I knew that I would have some eventually. "Oh, we're fine," the man replied. "I've just called AAA. We're waiting for a response. I'm more embarrassed than anything." "Did you catch any fish yet?" I told him no. I hadn't been fishing, and inquired if they needed anything in terms of food or water. They assured me that they were all set and thanked me. The woman asked if I was all alone. I told her I was. "You're so brave," she remarked more than once. "I saw you coming down from the mountain. Did you climb that mountain?" "I don't know how else to be," I responded. "No, I was just walking the road. I was hoping to get up to that other area." I pointed across the lake and into the area above. "I was hoping to do a Sound of Music dance and record it. It's sort of a running joke between some friends." "There's a lake up there," the man said. "There's a trail at the end of the road just down that way. Good fishing, too." I was glad to know this, as a road and a trail to an alpine lake sounded like a way better up than just picking up my way up and down the side of foothills. I thanked him for the information, told them that I would be back in a bit to check on them, and returned to my car. I had imagined myself swimming, but knew with the cold water and chill in the air that I really didn't want to. A dip, perhaps, to soak my hair. I decided to wait until they were sorted out. Instead, I walked along the rocky shore, taking in the day. I noticed the woman had left the minivan, walking stick in hand. I skipped up to the beach to join her. "Are you okay?" I asked. "Were you able to get in touch with AAA?" "Oh, yes, they're on their way," she responded. "I just needed to get away from Bob for a bit. He is so stubborn, and I just can't take him right now." We walked together, but apart, towards an area where someone had built a fire ring. "I wanted to see these pink rocks," she said, pointing at two. One was massive, the other smallish. I was thinking of getting one for my garden. Then, almost immediately, "I know that you're not supposed to do that." "Well, I think that it's okay to do here as long as you're not taking all of them, which would be pretty difficult." She agreed, but opted to take neither. One was far too big. The two of us wouldn't be able to carry it, even if we were successful in unearthing it from its sand tomb. The other was too small for her purposes. "It is pretty," she said. "Oh, Bob, he's so stubborn. But we've never gotten to a jam like this. He likes to take us places where he might be able to fish. I can't believe that he got us stuck like this." I hadn't mentioned it before, but I would never have driven the way they had, through the sand. There was a small road that circled the area, the sand being an unnecessary route, and the depth that they had gotten themselves into meant that they must have continued to dig in after getting stuck initially. It would have been better if they had either tried to back out or to gently continue forward without putting so much force into the attempt. I wasn't going to mention it now. "I saw a sprinter when I was camping near Joshua Tree a couple of months ago get stuck in the sand," I offered. "It happens. They were there for days. They were still there when we had left." We. I was no longer a we. I was a me. An I. I hadn't thought of this in at least a few days. A fact that was good, as healing a broken heart and untangling oneself from love is a difficult and painful task. But it was still there. The love, the wanting to reach out. "Oh, Joshua Tree," she exclaimed. "You know, I've never been there. I lived in California for 40 years. I moved here from Utah when I married Bob, but I've never been. I like the desert, but Bob likes to go where there might be fish." I remembered that they had said they were from Newport. "You're so close. You should try to go sometime." "Maybe, but Bob really likes to fish," she repeated. "Although he really can't much more. He's not nearly as mobile as he used to be. That's why we came over here, to see if we could get close enough to the lake to fish. But it's so rocky. We saw you and came over. That's why I'm so frustrated with Bob. I told him to tell AAA that they could see us both parked on this beach from the road, as clear as day." "There is that sandy area over at the beach over there," I offered, "or maybe the campground?" "The campground is why there are so many rocks on the other side." She pointed to where I'd eaten the day before, when I'd seen the camping areas on this side of the lake. "They only allow campers to fish at the beach, and they've put in rocks on both sides, just this last year, so that nobody else can get to the lake. And the state stocks the lake with fish, not the campground. Bob is going to make a call when we get back home. I just know he will." We reached the entrenched minivan, and she re-entered to wait. I went to the largest rock on the beach, climbed it, and began to wait for AAA. The truck blasted past our beach, towards the one where everyone else was camped, presumably accustomed to helping cars out of that area. The woman waved, and I stood up on the rock, waving both hands in the air. The truck saw us and turned, but down another road that I hadn't wanted to drive on, equally as rough as the one that led the others to the beach further in. For a moment, I was worried that the tow truck would need another tow truck, but it managed its way down and onto the beach. Normalcy was restored. I waved a goodbye, and the sun had warmed the day. I dipped in the lake and soaked my hair and my feet. Later, as I was returning from my sunset walk, I noticed a tow truck at the sandy beach just off of the road, pulling out a small black car. The next morning, I took the advice of Bob and drove the road to the trail that leads to Parker Lake. I was the first one there and spent the morning walking the 3 miles or so to the lake and then circumnavigating it. It was an adventure and filled my heart. I thanked Bob and his wife, grateful for having met them and my dirty but intrepid feet. I hoped that Bob's wife would get to see Joshua Tree and that Bob would be able to find places to fish until his last days. And that's my story. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you next time. Or outside.